All right, so this webinar this morning is on behavior incident reports in PIDS. So we are going to walk through several different components of the BIR pieces in PIDS, starting with just learning where the BIRs are located in PIDS, where that dashboard is. We are going to talk a little bit about security access. So what user roles can access the behavior incident report form in PIDS, what user roles can see data related to BIRs, specifically which ones can see child level information as it relates to a BIR. We're going to learn the best order of operations for entering a BIR. As we know in PIDS, anytime we're doing forms, typically there is a bit of setup that needs to be done in order for those forms to be able to be completed. So we will look at those steps. We'll also learn how to enter a behavior incident report. We'll look at that form and the fields that are in that form. And then we'll spend a good amount of time looking at the various reports that you can run from PIDS to do some BIR analysis. Okay, let me shift screens here. And back up. So let's talk a little bit about access first before we dive into the system. So what I have up on the screen is the security role access grid. This is available on the PIDS dashboard. If you don't have a link for that, I'd be happy to provide you with a link during this call today. But this tool really lays out all of the different types of security roles that are available in PIDS. The section that I have up on this slide shows the program level roles. And what I want to point out is there's really only a couple of roles here that can both see child level information. So we're talking about child names, date of birth, demographics as it relates to behavior incident reports, and that can also enter BIR information. So some of these roles allow you to see that information, but do not allow the user to enter that information. So starting with the data collector, this role is probably one of the most powerful roles in PIDS in that it can do and it can see a lot in the system. It can see all child level information. They are certainly somebody who would be entering children into the system, perhaps entering BIRs into the system. So that data collector role can view child names, can also view teachers' names, which we're not really focused on today, but can add and edit and delete forms. So they are people that can not only see this information, but can enter it into the system, can complete BIRs. Compared to the detailed data viewer and the aggregate data viewer, if we take a look at these roles, they both still can go into the system, access behavior incident report forms, and see the information, including child names and demographics associated with those behavior incidents. Okay, so those two boxes here are flagged yes. However, if I go over here, I can see that these ones are flagged no, indicating that they cannot add, edit, or delete forms. So they would not be somebody who has access to complete a behavior incident report, but they do have access to see it. The only other role outside of these three roles here that have access to view child information related to BIRs is your application admin role. So that's that high level state role that is able to do and see absolutely everything in the system. And so that would be a role assigned to somebody who's performing those administrative functions in PIDS. However, if you have somebody in your state who is doing those administrative functions for PIDS for your state, you also have the option of using the state data administrator role for those exact same administrative functions. The difference with that role versus the application admin is the state data admin does not have access to view child's names or information. So that is the one piece that is hidden from that administrative role. So in looking at the order of operations for this, we have, of course, a set way of doing a little bit of setup so that when you go in to complete a behavior incident report, you're able to use all of the fields and complete it entirely and not get an error when you try to save it because it's incomplete. So those steps are simply just you have to create your classrooms. And that's step one. And then you want to enroll or enter your children. And then you want to, as part of that, make sure the children are enrolled in classrooms. As we'll see when we get into the behavior incident report tool, that you're going to need to select a classroom first, and then it's going to, or a child first, excuse me, and then it's only going to give you the option of where the child is enrolled, what classroom they're in for that classroom selection. So those two pieces in the BIR form are contingent on this setup being completed. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into PIDS now. Well, I'm going to get logged into our test site, and today I'm going to get logged in as a data collector. So that's that first role that we talked about today. That is a very powerful role. I can do and see essentially everything for the program with this role. I'm going to go ahead and select that role today. All right, and so I have my PID screen loaded up, and so we are just going to start walking through each of those learning objectives that we have laid out. So starting with the setup, first pointing out that the behavior incident report dashboard is up near the top of your list of dashboards. So it's the third one down on the list from my list here. Okay. As with all of the dashboards, it will give you a number here in the black oval, and this indicates how many have occurred within the last year. So I can see here that I have 17 behavior incidents that have occurred within the last year. Okay. So to do those setup pieces, we're just going to quickly walk through those. We want to spend the most of our time really digging into the behavior incident form itself and looking at those reports, but do want to just walk through those setup pieces, starting with creating a classroom. We come down to the classrooms dashboard, and if we click on that, our classroom list will load up. So just like all of our dashboards, we're provided with a list of information. So this is all of the current classrooms that I have in here for my test program, Alice in Wonderland. So to create a new classroom, I would just click on the Add New Classroom button. And we'll go ahead and let that load here. All right. And now we have 6 fields that we can fill in to create a classroom, starting with the classroom name. Okay. The classroom ID number. Currently in the system, we do have to enter a number in here. It can be a combination of numbers and letters. The system will not at this point auto-generate an ID number in this space, as it will for children and as it also does for pyramid model professionals. So for people that we're entering into the system will auto create one for you if this is left blank. But we don't have that function quite ready yet for the classroom. It is coming though later on this summer. That will be available. So where you can just leave this blank and the system will create one for you. Okay. So the location here is typically just the city in which the program is located. So I'll hop over there. And then we are going to select yes or no for the next couple of questions. So is this an infant toddler classroom? Is this a preschool classroom? And is this classroom currently being served by a substitute? Okay. So the 6 fields are all completed. They're all required fields. So once we're done with that, we can go ahead and save our classroom and it will load it into the system and bring us back to the classroom dashboard. They're in alphabetical order here, so we can see if we scroll down a little bit, our Oregon classroom has now been created right down here at the bottom of the list. All right, so that's step one for setup. Step two is now let's create a child. So we're going to click on the children dashboard to do that. And there are a couple of different ways that you can create children into this system. So we can do them one at a time by clicking on this Add New Child button. We can also upload an entire roster of children. So if I click on the Upload Roster, this will take me to a new page where I will be provided with a button that will give me a template. I'm seeing that my internet connection is unstable right now, so I'm going to go ahead and stop my video because that's not an important piece, so that hopefully that gives me a bit more bandwidth. But please pause me if I run into any internet issues that might interrupt this webinar. So we have our download template button, our download example button. So if I were to go and use this template, it's going to give me an Excel document that will give me all of the different columns and the different variables that I would need to complete and fill into this spreadsheet so that I can then come down to this section and import this whole file into the system. So this is a quick way to load in all of the children that are in a particular program into the PIDS system without having to do them one at a time. Okay. There's instructions here. You can download an example, right? So that is one way we can do that. But we're going to go back to our children dashboard and we're going to just enter a single child individually. So to do that, we're going to click on the Add New Child button. And the form will load. Okay. So this form is a lot like the Pyramid Model Professionals form, if you're familiar with that. It's a lot like the Teapot form in that it only presents me with the basic information section first. So I see basic information here at the top. If I scroll down, this is all that I have currently on this page. However, once I complete this and I click that Save button, I am going to be presented with 3 more sections to complete to really fully complete a child profile in the PIDS system. So let's go ahead and get this one started. So we are going to go ahead and create a child here. Okay, we're going to give the child date of birth. Okay. Now this ID number I can leave blank. I could also enter one. So if the program has an ID number that you wish to use for each of the children because it's in a different registry system and you want to use that same number, you do have that option. I am going to just leave it blank today and the system will populate a random auto-generated ID number. One thing that is important to note about these ID numbers, if you are entering them manually and not letting the system create one for you, you want to make sure that the ID number letter combination does not in any way identify the child. So for example, in this situation, I wouldn't want to use KS1003, right? So the initials of the child plus the part of the date of birth. That would be an identifying value that somebody could potentially use to identify this child. So in the system, when children's names are hidden from other roles, other security access roles in the system, they will be presented with an ID number. So we want to make sure that that ID number is only used for doing data analysis, making that particular person a unique record in the system, and is not something that can be linked back to that child to identify that child. We'll go ahead and give this child an enrollment date. So we'll go November of 21. Okay. Gender. So all of these demographic fields are required in the system, so I must make a selection. However, each of these does provide you with a prefer not to report option. Okay, so you can select that. Go ahead and fill these in. Race. Dual language learner and IEP are the next fields. These are also required fields. So I can go ahead and select yes or no here for a dual language learner, and yes or no for if the child has an IEP. And then last here is identifying and selecting that we have received permission to enter this child's information into the PIDS system. So the only option here is yes. Okay. And there is a place here that is optional where you can upload that document. So we definitely do recommend that prior to programs entering children's specific information, names, date of birth, demographics into any system that we receive parent guardian permission to do that. The last fields here are discharge date and discharge reason. We're of course going to leave those blank because we want to actively enroll this child into the system. We would only use these if the child was leaving the program, so we were discharging them from the program, in which then we would come in and indicate the date that they are being discharged and the reason that they are being discharged. We'll go ahead and save that and move on to the next step. So as you see, once I save it, it gives me that nice green confirmation saying, yep, we've got all of the fields in here completed. I see that the system created an ID number for this child, so that looks good. Now, when I scroll down, I see those additional 3 sections that I talked about in the beginning. We have a section for notes, status history, and classroom assignment. Really, the one that I need to do today is the classroom assignment. That's that 3rd step in our setup steps so that we can go ahead and do a behavior incident report for this child. Just to talk a little bit about these fields, though, this note field can just be used to write a general note about the child, for the child in the record. This can be used for a variety of different reasons. It's not intended to be a case note type of field, but just a place to add any specific details about this child that we want to have in the PID system. The status, this can be used if there is a temporary leave. So if maybe they are on a temporary medical leave, they're still enrolled in into the program, but maybe they're having a temporary leave, you can update a status. We're going to leave this just as enrolled because that's what we need in order to do the documentation that we're going to do. But the last thing we're going to do is create a classroom assignment for this child. So I am going to go ahead and do that. That's the last piece that we need to do. So I'm going to click on Add New Assignment. Okay. And then we're going to enroll this child in a classroom. So all we've done up to this point is enroll a child in a program, but we have to assign the child to a particular classroom as well in the program. Okay. We'll go assign date. We'll just do 2. Okay. And now if we scroll down on our classroom list, we can see the classroom that we just created. Okay, so we're going to do an assign date and we're going to identify the classroom. Leave date and leave reason. Of course, we're again going to leave those blank because those would only be used when and if this child is no longer actively enrolled in this particular classroom and perhaps they're moving to a different classroom when we would use those fields. I'm going to go ahead and save my classroom assignment. And now it brings me back to the child profile form. So I'm back here at my form where I have my classroom assignment, my status, my notes, and all of my basic information. So this entire form here is the entire completed child profile now in PIDS, and I have completed all of my setup. So I'm going to go ahead and save this entire thing. And we are done with our setup pieces. All right, so before moving into the actual BIR form, I just want to take a moment and pause and see if there are any questions about setup and offer a space to answer those questions.
Summer, I was wondering if we upload a roster of children, do we still need to go in and individually assign them a classroom? I have not looked at the template. Apologies.
No, no worries. Yes, you can assign them a classroom.
Can I do it with the batch upload or does it have to be done individually?
Yes, it should be a part of the upload rosters, but let's just go ahead and pull that down, that example. Yeah, so it's a column in here. So it would just be already in the spreadsheet for you. So you don't have to go back in and do that classroom assignment. You would have to create your classrooms, of course, in order for the system to recognize what the classroom assignment would be.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. All right, so then let's move on to the actual behavior incident form. So we're going to jump up here to this dashboard, the behavior incident reports form, and we will go ahead and click on that, and the form or the dashboard will load. So this dashboard provides us with a list of all of the behavior incidents that have been completed so far in our program. So this will be an inclusive list, all of them. So if I scroll down here, I can see we've got quite a few in the system. We've got 2 pages worth. So just know that this is going to be your entire list, where your pie graph here that is going to show you just a nice visual of behavior incidents by type of behavior. This is only going to be representative of the last year. So it says right here in this blue box that this is going to show you behavior incidents for the past year. All of these tables are interactive, or these column headers. So if I want to sort by incident date time, I can click on that column header and it will resort the data by date. It will also sort it by alphabetical order. If I want to select problem behavior, you can reorganize the list this way. Our actions button here does allow us to go in and view, edit, and delete. So because I do have that type of role in the system, I am given all of these options. So I could delete if I were to make a mistake, edit. I could also just view a static version of it. So I have all of these available here to use. To create a new incident report, we're going to use our blue Add New button. So we'll go ahead and click on Add New Incident Report button, and the form loads. Okay. So this form mirrors the NCPMI tool as far as all of the different items that are listed in each of the categories that we are going to create. So first things first is we got to select an incident date and time. But before I do that, I want to just highlight here that you can see the child field. I can't do anything with it. It's a not modifiable, it's a static field right now, and so is classroom. This is because I have not selected an incident date and time yet. So the system is going to want to look at that date and make sure it's only providing me a list of children that were actively enrolled at the time of this incident date and time. So it's just one of those back-end validations to make sure we're putting good data in the system and not making mistakes. So we'll go ahead and just select today. And we'll say 7 a.m. Okay, and now my child field becomes white, and so then I can go ahead and make a selection here. So by clicking on this, we can see the list of children that were actively enrolled as of today at 7 in the morning. So we see the child that we just created. So we'll go ahead and grab this child. And then we see our classroom field also become available now. So the system is going to say, okay, we know this is the date, this child was active in the system at this time, and now what classroom is Kelsey enrolled in? So that's where those setup pieces need to be done. So if we had skipped that part, we would not have a classroom selection for this particular child. So we'll go ahead and select the Oregon classroom and then move on to complete the rest of our behavior incident report. So starting with the problem behavior, and all of these fields that we're going to be completing next, these next 6 fields are all ways that we're going to be able to run reports and aggregate the data. So want to just point that out as well. And we're going to look at all of that in, as soon as we're done here filling this out. So starting with the problem behavior, if I click here, we have a long list of options that we can select for problem behavior. We can also select the other option if none of these really apply to the situation and type this in. I would caution users to use this though, because currently we don't have a good report to for the specific words that are typed into this field. So what you would see in your reports is other, but you would not see the specific details that are typed in this field. So when possible, use other, obviously, if that is what is necessary to accurately describe the behavior. However, want to make sure that, folks know that that specific field and those details are not a reportable option right now in the system. It is on our list of things to add, but currently doesn't exist. Okay. So we'll go with non-compliance for this one. And activity is the next field. So what activity was occurring when this behavior occurred, when this problem behavior was occurred. Okay, so we'll select cleanup. Next field is others involved. Okay, so who was involved? We have teacher, assistant teacher, peers, therapist, substitute. So who all was involved? All of these fields also, we can only make a single selection, and that is so that we can have good reporting. Possible motivation. Okay. And this list certainly does have an option for we don't know. We may not know all the times what the motivation was, but it is just indicating what is the possible motivation. What do we think? People that were involved in observing this behavior and intervening. Okay. And then our strategy response. Okay. So this is an important list in that there are a couple of options in here that do, on the back end of the system, flag as an in-school suspension. So one of the reports that we're going to look at, the BIR Equity Profile Report, does allow us to look at in-school suspensions, out-of-school suspensions, and expulsions. And this is one of the ways that it's getting that data to look at it by different demographics and different children. So if we were to select time in different class, or an adult outside of class, so anything that pertains to being outside of the classroom would be considered one of those in-school suspension outcomes. So that's an important thing to note in this strategy response. And then same with strategy response, the admin follow-up also has some options here that can flag as a suspension as well. Okay. So if the child was temporarily removed from the classroom, sent home, okay, so those are going to be flagged as potentially out of school suspensions in our system when we're looking at that data in reports. All right. Okay, so then we are going to have our behavior description. This is the last required field in this. So this is where you're going to make your, your description, your antecedent, what the behavior looked like, what the outcome was afterwards, or follow up, any details around the behavior you're going to put in the behavior description. And then you have one additional notes field. So this is additional, this is not required, but if it's helpful for the person that's entering this, they can go ahead and add a note. So we've completed our entire behavior incident report form now, so we can go ahead and see this into the system. So it takes us back to the dashboard. We can see now our behavior incident report up at the top. So for our child, Kelsey Smith, non-compliance in the Oregon classroom occurred today at 7 in the morning, has been added to our system automatically. So our pie graph is going to update automatically, and now we can go ahead and run reports. So let's dive into the reports now. So we've gone through our setup pieces, classroom children. We know now how and where to enter a behavior incident report form. So let's look at all of the wonderful reports that PIDS has to offer for behavior incident. I'm going to go to the reports module. Up at the top right-hand side of our screen next to my username, I do have a reports option. Okay. I am actually going to switch into a different account for this piece of the demonstration so that I have a test account with a lot of data. So bear with me just one moment while I make that switch. right, so we're going to go into the reports module, and I'm going to use our handy dandy keyword text search here. So I'm going to put in BIR. Instead of thumbing through all of the different pages of reports, they are listed in alphabetical order, but it's certainly so much easier when just typing in whatever it is that you're wanting to run a report on, typing that in there, and then the list is going to filter for me. And now I have all of my behavior incident report forms. So in the webinar handout, which if you didn't receive in the link to register for this webinar, I will put it in the chat before we end today. And in that handout, it does give you a great example of each of these reports and talks about what each of them does. But there are the BIR summary report, the program summary report, item detail, equity profiles, and then children classroom total incident report forms. These ones all are going to give us visuals and tables to do some data analysis, whereas this BIR data export report is only going to give us, for whatever date range we want, an Excel export of all of the details pertaining to BIR. So this one is used if you want to do your own analysis, you want to do your own pivots or what have you, you can use this data export report. So the first one we are going to look at today is the BIR summary report. So we'll go ahead and select that one. This is a great report to kind of start with because it's going to give you so much information. So if we're just kind of diving into our analysis and we're not really sure what it is that we want to look at or look for, this is a great place to start. So when I click on the select button, I also have this documentation link that will provide me with an example of what's in the report, and any calculated metrics that are in the report. It will give you where it's pulling those numbers from. So that's a helpful tool right there, right next to the report. We hit the select button, and then on the left-hand side of our screen, we have all of our different criteria. So we need to fill in some of this information to tell the system what specifically we want to look at. So starting with our date range, so I'm going to go ahead and back this one up in this test site to make sure we're getting a good sample. And then we have our end date, so I'll just leave that as of June 30th. For this report, and one other report also has this feature, we have this report focus. So if we're running this and we want to be able to not only look at some aggregate information, but in this same report, we also want to be able to dive into the details of each specific child, we would select the children focus. So let's say we want to look at how much non-compliance we're seeing in the program. This report will give us that information, but then if we want to drill into, okay, what children are displaying non-compliance that we're documenting BIRs on, that by selecting children, we'll have all of that information on the back end of our report. Same goes for classrooms. So if we wanted to just see specifically, we have a bunch of non-compliance happening. We see that it's mostly happening on Wednesdays, but what classrooms is it happening in? This will give us that information if we were to select classrooms, and it will not give us the child details. Okay. I'm going to select all so that we can see what both of those look like in this example. Okay. So from here, we do have the option to select which classroom we want to look at. So if we were just concerned with looking at what behavior incident reports are being documented in the Hares classroom or the Badgers classroom, we can go ahead and select one or as many of those as we need to. If we leave it blank, it's going to select all of them. Same with children. Okay, so if we wanted to just drill down and to look a report for a particular child or a particular group of children, we can do that. Same with races, ethnicity, gender. So all of those demographic pieces that we just completed in that child profile are ways that we can slice the data. IEP status, dual language learner status, and then that's it for the child-specific information. Now the system's also going to give us all of those different fields in the behavior incident report form itself. So starting with the problem behavior, if we feel like we're having a lot of disruption tantrums, we just want to hone in on the specifics of that. We can select that. Activities, others involved, possible motivation, strategy response, admin follow-up. So all of those fields in our BIR form are ways that we're going to be able to look at this data. I'm going to leave it all open so that we're able to get a good example of this report in this test site. So I'm going to click Run Report and allow this one to load here. And this is going to be a pretty large report when it loads. So it will give us a interactive table of contents, which is nice. So just to orient you a little bit to the actual report itself and what we can do with it, we have here up at the top, we can see it's 1 through 38 pages. So I can navigate by using this list of page numbers. I can navigate using this right caret to scroll to the next page. This one takes me to the very last page. This one will make it so I can just scroll down through the whole thing. So I'm actually going to select that one. I can zoom, I can print, I can export this and PDF it. Okay, so lots of different options. You can also do a keyword search. So if you want to just search for a particular keyword, you do have that option over here. All right, so we have our interactive table of contents. So let's just jump right into this report. So let's say we want to jump right to this section. We can go to BIR day of the week. So let's go to this section here by activity, right? So it just gives us a shortcut, but because we selected that multi-page mode, we can also just scroll up and down and explore this report here. So this one will tell us by hour of the day, what's happening at our program. Okay, so we can see where behavior incident reports are most often being recorded. So in this test site, we can see 8 a.m. is a really hot time here where we've got, almost 26 or so behavior incident reports for our time frame that we selected here, right? 10 a.m. Okay, so that gives us a nice visual of that. If you like to have the data in a table form, this report will give you both the visual and the table. Okay, so we can see here the breakdown, and we can see those exact numbers here. Scrolling down, we have BIRs by problem behavior. So the problem behaviors are abbreviated down here on the x-axis. So we have physical aggression, non-compliance, disruption tantrums are our top 3 here. And then going to the next page, it will spell those out since they are abbreviated on the bar chart. BIR by activity. Okay. We won't spend too much time in this report. I think most of you have seen some of my demonstrations before. I do usually highlight this report, but just want to give you a sense this is a good place to kind of start with when looking at your behavior data, because it does give that really all-encompassing view. Scrolling down a little bit further, I do want to jump down to the bottom of the report though, so pardon my scrolling for just a minute here because I want you to see what we were talking about as it relates to the classroom specifics or the child specifics. So here we have total number of monthly incidents by child ID. It's giving me this graph because I selected all. I would also get this graph if I selected children. If I just selected classrooms, I wouldn't have this view, but I would have this view for classrooms. So by child ID here, so these are all representing children here. So F5 is a child, E5 is a child. Those are their ID numbers in this test site. Okay. And then it will also break it down in a table, a detailed table. So this column here on the left-hand side, these are all children ID numbers, okay? So this is a child, this is a child. So if you wanted to drill down into a specific child and see when behaviors occurred, it gives you those details because we selected all for children. And then it would do the same for classroom. Scroll down a little bit further. I think the classroom is last. Maybe before that. So some children here. Okay. And now these are our classrooms. Okay, so it will also give you a breakdown by classroom in the same really detailed view. So that's what this report focus does. All right. So I'm going to return back to the report list and we're going to move on to our next report. Okay, so we did our BIR summary report. Now we're going to look at the BIR program summary report. We're going to select this one. We will go ahead and back up our dates in this test site. Again, I'm going to leave all of my filters open, but I have all of those same filters we saw. And we're going to go ahead and run this one. Okay. So this one is going to give us a summary of trending. So we're going to look at some line graphs in this one. And so we can see frequency over the course of time. So I again have a table of contents. I'm going to go ahead and click just using my right arrow to go to the next page. So this is the type of data that you're going to get in the BIR summary report for a program. All right, so this one gives you the total number of BIRs for your date range, your total number of children enrolled, and then your total number of children with BIRs. So this is a really important point. I do often get a lot of questions when programs are first coming on, if they should enroll all of their children in the program or just the ones that we're documenting behavior incident reports on. And the answer is always enroll all of the children. Otherwise, data is going to get skewed. You're not going to be able to get an accurate representation of behaviors and what's going on in a program if you just enter the children that are having behavior incident reports written on them. So we have our line graph here starting back in January of 2001. Not a lot of data in the system. And then we can see when we started to see some activity here with BIR forms. So we can just get an overall sense of where we're trending. So this is our number of BIRs, number of children with BIRs. Going on to the next page, we have our average number of BIRs, our average BIRs per child, or average number of BIRs per child with a BIR. Okay, so we can get a sense of what's going on there. And then our percentage. Okay, so our percentage of total BIRs and our percentage of children enrolled with a BIR. The program summary report gives you those line graphs so that you can just see trending what is happening over the course of time as it relates to BIR activity in this program. And then the rest of the report, so we have our visual line graphs. The rest of the report, we can see there's 20 pages total to this report, is going to be all of the same data, number, percentage, average, but in a table form. Okay, so that's the rest of this report.
Summer, if you had selected all races or ethnicities, would it have given you a breakdown to compare if we're, being overly exclusionary?
Not in this report. In the next report we're going to look at is where we're going to get those details right. Yeah, and when I don't select any of these, that is the same as saying select all. So know that when you're in there running reports, you can click the select all button. If you leave it open and blank, it's automatically going to default to selecting all of them. So yeah, let's great segue into the next report here, which is the BIR equity profile report. So this one is probably one of the most powerful reports in the system. So let's go ahead and select that. And this is where we'll now be able to dive into those equity questions. Are there disparities? How big are the disparities? What group is being affected? Those type of questions. I'm going to go ahead and back up my dates here again. Actually, January 20, and then we'll move this to today. Okay. So this one, I have a few more different criteria I can select. So we are going to select what BIR profile group we want to explore in this report. And so that is asking me race, gender, ethnicity, IEP status, dual language learner status. Okay, so how do I want to see the data? What demographic do I want to explore in this report? So we'll go ahead and select race for this example. And then BIR profile item. So what do we want to look at? We have the options here to explore the data by just behavior incident frequency. So how often are we seeing behavior incidents documented on certain children of a particular race, of a particular gender, or any of those other categories that we had up here in the profile group? Or do we want to look at those in-school suspensions or out-of-school suspensions that we talked about earlier? Those are extracted based off of those strategy responses and the admin follow-up in our behavior incident report forms. So that's what's going to give us that data. And then dismissals. So there is an option in the behavior incident report for expulsion, dismissing from the program. Also, that would be extracted from a child's discharge in the system. So as we saw in the child profile, there was a place to indicate the discharge date and the discharge reason. Some of those reasons would flag it as a dismissal or an expulsion from the program. We'll just look at behavior incident frequency for this particular scenario. And then I have all my other filters. I'm going to leave all of them open and blank, okay, so that we're grabbing all of this information and we can get a sense of what this report will provide us. So I'm going to click Run Report, and it will load in the center of my screen. So this report is organized by 3 guiding questions, and it lays all this out for us. The first guiding question is, are outcomes equitable for all groups? The second question is, how big are the disparities? So if we are seeing disparities, how big are those disparities? And then how much of our focal group is being affected potentially by disproportionate discipline? So those are our guiding questions in this report. So we will be able to do that analysis here. All right, so my report has loaded in the center of the page. I can see again my interactive table of contents. So I can see I'm going to get all of these details for each of the race categories that we have currently in the PIDS system. We're going to go through this one at a time here. So I'm going to scroll to the next page. And here is where those guiding questions are. So guiding question 1, guiding question 2, and then guiding question 3. So this is the report that's honing in on all of that. It gives us a bit of detail around the child composition. So are outcomes equitable for all groups? So this is going to be that percentage of children who belong to a target group. So our target group is, we're looking at it by race, and who have also have at least one BIR. We're also going to get a BIR ratio rate. So the rate for that target group, and then it gives you how it's calculated. So divided by the BIR rate for all other children, 1 would be equal. Okay, gives you the information as far as disparities as well, and then how much of your group. We'll go to the next page where we dive into the data, and it is a table form here. We do have a couple of graphs that I am going to show you as well. So on this particular page of the report, we can see we have the total number of BIRs at the top left-hand side, total number of children that are enrolled, 42, and then total number of children with BIRs, 19. And this is for my particular date range that I selected. On the left-hand side of this table is where I have all of the different race categories. Okay? And they are abbreviated here, but they are spelled out in pages after this. So we have the number enrolled. Okay, so we can see that we have for, let's see, white, and for American Indian, we have 0. Okay, so it gives you the total number, the breakdown there, the number of children in this group with a BIR. Okay, so we have 29 white children enrolled in this program, and 15 of those white children have a BIR. Total number of BIRs from the group, okay, our percentages. This section of the table gives us information pertaining to guiding question 1. This gives us information pertaining to guiding question 2 and guiding question 3. Okay. If I just flip back a page real quick, we can see we have those 2 metrics here: child composition, BIR ratio. Child composition, BIR ratio. So it gives you this explanation, what we're looking at here, and then it gives you the actual data for this particular group that we're looking at. So this is great. This is a lot of information. It can be quite complicated to kind of dive into from this lens. But if I go to the next page, the beautiful thing about this report is that for each of those race categories, it's going to do a nice summary for me. So starting with A, so Asian, so as we looked at here, we had our abbreviations, now they're spelled out. So for Asian children, it gives me a child composition first. So of the 19 children who received at least one BIR for our date range here, 5.3 of those are Asian. So this group comprises 9.5% of the total child enrollment. Then we have our BIR ratio, our BIR rate, okay? So these would change if we had selected a different option other than behavior incident frequency. Okay, so if we had selected in-school suspensions, out-of-school suspensions, or dismissals, what we would be looking at here is not the average number of BIRs, but we would be looking at the average number of suspensions for this particular group of children. So scrolling through each of those different race categories is going to have its own summary. I'm going to turn this into a scrolling so I can do this and get to some of the other visuals in this report so we can see it's just broken down the same way so you can really drill into each of these different categories. But it gives you that excellent summary, which is very helpful. Let this one load here. Scrolling down, what I want to get to is towards the end of the report here. Keep going. It's going to give me a couple of really excellent bar charts. Okay. So now up on the screen, I have incident frequency information by race. So, and if we had selected gender, ethnicity, any of these other options, we would have those represented here down on the x-axis, or we would have those represented in each of those different tables of the page. Okay, so it just depends on how you want to look at the data. I'll organize it for you. So we can see Asian here, Black here, multi, and then white. Okay, so we can get the breakdown of the total children enrolled, total number of children with a BIR, and then total number of BIRs for each of these categories. And then on the next page, we do get a behavior incident frequency risk ratio. So this is going to tell us, are there any possible disparities? So we can see here that in this particular test site, that white children are just about 1.7 more likely to have a behavior incident documented on them than other children. Whereas children who are multi-race here would be just over 1 time more likely to have a behavior incident documented on them. Again, if we had changed this to suspensions, then we would be looking at more likely to be suspended, more likely to be expelled based off of these demographics. Okay. So this is a really excellent report in the way that it can provide that breakdown of information for you to explore some of those questions. I want to take a minute to return back to the report list. Let's see. So we've gone through those few reports. Let's take a look at the BIR item detail report next. And I know our time is running out, so I will save a couple of minutes here at the end for some questions. But I just want to show you one more report example. So I'm going to go ahead and back this data up and select today. Okay. So this report is just going to give us the total number of BIRs, a monthly breakdown, the percentage of the total by all of those BIR form metrics. So by each of those different fields in the BIR, so the problem behavior, activity, others involved, possible motivation. Let's just jump into possible motivation. and see what this graph looks like. So we have our motivations abbreviated down on our x-axis, and each of the different bars represents, and so a different time period. So this would be a lot of data to look at, making each of these bars a little bit smaller. But then we have down on this graph the total number of BIRs by possible motivation. Okay. And it gives you the number form, and then it also gives you the percentage on the left-hand side. Okay. So that is an example of what this report provides. And then we have a pie graph before we get to all the detailed information in our table view. Okay. So this breaks down the possible motivation. Again, it's abbreviated here, so we can see where we're seeing the most BIRs and looking at the motivation there, what's being recorded. And then scrolling to the next page, we have it abbreviated, and then it does give you a key at the end of this table with all of them spelled out. So here is our possible motivation legend. So this report is organized. It goes through each of those different pieces of the BIR, giving you that total number over time, the percentage, your pie graph, your table, and then it gives you your legend for each of those pieces. So if I go back to the table of contents, we can see how this one is structured. So by problem behavior, monthly, total, percentage of total, we have our pie chart, and then our legend and our detailed table information in there as well. All right, so want to make sure that I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing now, that everybody did receive a using BIRs in PIDS webinar handout. So I'm going to go ahead and drop that in the chat right now. There are a couple other reports that we didn't highlight in this webinar, but the handout does provide you with a detailed explanation of each of those reports and what they will show you, but we certainly hit the highlights today of what the BIR reporting module offers. But want to take a moment now to just open it up for any questions in the last couple of minutes, thoughts, comments related to behavior incident tracking. Also in the webinar handout, I did put links to just general behavior incident tracking information. So obviously this webinar is just on how to document behaviors in the PIDS system, how we can run reports on them. Does not hit on a lot of those details about, well, when do I record a behavior incident? How do I select one of these categories? That type of information would all be provided in the BIR trainings that are done by PMC or those certified trainers. Some links to that information is also included in the handout. Right. Any questions?
Thanks, Summer. Great reports. It was really fun to see all those reports. Some of them are really great, and I can see us using those. So I appreciated the webinar. It was great to see that information. I was just curious, like, do you guys, because you talked about some of that data here at the end between the BIRs and the expulsion and suspension. Is that something that you guys report out, like as a whole, an aggregate?
We do not, because PIDS is, I mean, it's growing rapidly, and we have, 12 states now that are using it. We don't have a good sample yet of data that we can say. We can't tell a national story yet because we really just have pockets of information. So it is information we have looked at, but nothing that we are publicly reporting. Other states have. Wisconsin put some information about it in their annual report this last year, where they were able to say that children in a pyramid model program are this percentage less likely to be expelled than other programs. So they're starting, because they've been using the system and they have a lot of really rich data, they're starting to be able to state some of those really amazing metrics in their annual report. So some states are starting to do that.
Wonderful. So what annual report was that? Is that something I can just go to?
Yeah,
I'm sure learning, or where is it outside of?
They have a Wisconsin pyramid. I think if you just Googled Wisconsin pyramid model, you should be able to pull up but I will track it down for you, and I will send it to everybody in the group so you can see that annual report.
Awesome. Well, those reports are great, and I look forward to being able to use those and helping our programs use those reports, because I think they're going to be very informative. So thanks for sharing that with us today.
Absolutely. My pleasure. All right. Well, looks like there's no other questions then. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.